It's on.
It's on, okay. Welcome back. That's okay. We're going to be moving into the account overview portion. We just completed the budget, 2018 budget kickoff portion. Now we're going to the account overview. And so Gordon is going to walk through, in an overview, the account categories and the accounts, and then we're going to go into Q&A and cut it off prior to all the Q&A, because that'd be really boring. So, as opposed to just partially boring. Okay, Gordon.
Okay, so
Worth listening to.
on the income side of things, I think we've discussed that really the general operating is the balancing number based on all the expense inputs. There would be some best guesses made for unpledged giving and loose play. Predominantly that is predicated on some level of history. Unpledged giving is a rather difficult number to come up with. I'm presuming, unless we hear differently, that the debt reduction support would stay at the 50,130, and if we drop down to the 05, the missions and outreach income, the $4,000 from last year was a transfer from Judy's discretionary fund. That was a one-time item, so that would be zero moving forward. The next two sections are ministerial staff and general staff. There we would look at the detail and work with Carol and other members of HR. A couple of things, Carol, obviously Chris has just joined us. It would be helpful if you could share with me, not now, but when you get a chance, just what his salary details are, such that I could include that. And then work with the HR group to see if there are any recommended increases for existing staff members, and I guess that may include Chris. I don't know exactly what his contractual arrangements are, but if you could share all of that, that would be very helpful. The administrative portion of it, I've chatted with Maddie on the fly here, but again I would work with her on most of these line items in the upper area. The copier lease, which was fairly static for a while, changed dramatically through some good work from Melanie and Maddie, so we need to re-look at that. Reconciliation was a one-time expense and would disappear, and the component of Judy's contractual information I believe would be the same, but again I would appreciate if there could be some confirmation. Again, not for tonight, but just let me know if there were any changes to the contract. So that takes us through worship and disbursements, administrative disbursements. Then on to worship. As Tom said, the key thing is really new projects, using last year as a guide if there are new initiatives that we want to take. I know that worship was looking at flowers and maybe doing something different with that. That may be an area that needs some information. Christian education, particularly with Chris having just joined us, may be an area that will be a little more challenging. Again, just in terms of timing, not challenging from any other perspective. But again, looking at the overall programs as they are here and working to see where maybe investments need to be made for next year, where maybe we can use other materials, etc., based on Chris's experience and the people that form the Christian Education Commission. Moving on from there, we have congregational life. That probably tends to be a fairly constant item. I think they would benefit from knowing if there's any special events coming specifically. I think they've done a good job in the past of just trying to look into make some assumptions based on what's happened previously and build that into their budget. Mission expenses, I would look to to Sue and Bill. That would include the mission expenses under 070, which were the Montlure Habitat and Family Promise support, as well as the Deacons component. Sue's indicated in a previous meeting that they would want to change some of these categories, and that would be excellent and fine if they were to do that. Social justice is relatively a small number. Stewardship expenses, I think I would look to Dennis and Ted perhaps to look at what we have here and determine are there any changes that need to take place based on how we intend to move forward. Facilities is probably singularly the next largest element of this. There are, in past budgets, Rob Henry has provided information that was very, very helpful in terms of what the assumptions were. Sometimes the assumptions didn't work out, sometimes it was better, sometimes it was a bit more challenged, but at least there were good assumptions around these. So last year's budget for facilities was a little over 67,000 of a 444,000 budget. So it's a very meaningful component. Not that they aren't all important, but it has obviously the ability to move the needle. Spoken about Deacons, human resources. We had a budget last year for the first time. I'm sure that we spent quite as much, so again, it's probably something to visit with Cindy. Dave Boyne can obviously provide a little bit of colour on what we anticipated. There were some elements of that associated with the handbook, which, please God, isn't quite as voluminous this year, I would hope you're thinking. But really good job done in that, and that's where a lot of the expenses were anticipated. Moving on to, which double side am I on here?
Presbytery.
Presbytery. So, presbytery is something that has several elements. So, there are 4 special offerings this current year. If we were to continue with 4, that would be one question to stewardship. They really are receipt from the generous contributions from the congregation, and then they are issued out to presbytery or other areas of our greater needs. So they're really in and out in a large fashion. Per capita in the expense side is a guesstimate of how much we would receive from existing congregation. You can see, for example, in the 17 budget, we paid $10,800 to presbytery, and we were budgeting, guessing at $4,250. Right now, it probably looks like that's a little light, and it will be little later, probably towards the end of the calendar year, that presbytery tell us how much the cost will be per person. We probably are carrying a lot of people on our rolls that go back many years, and we're continuing to pay for them. So if there's any purging that's happened, it could be helpful. The last line in the disbursements is our contribution to presbytery. And again, that's something that I would think with Dennis and probably Sue, that potentially that may stay the same. It's an area, should we have any shortfalls, that we would look to.
Kind of going back to the budget process, is this chunk presbytery, is that to be handled by, who last year did that? Was it the Finance Commission that did that?
There's a session Session makes a final decision on it.
Okay, so
Really?
as far as putting together the preliminary budget though, is it Gordon for now?
Initially, yeah, I think, I suspect that we wouldn't add, and I'll take Judy's guidance on this, that would be really helpful too. But my suspicion is we wouldn't add to that, and as a first pass, we'd want to at least continue with the same level of support to the presbytery. But I can reach out to Judy when it's appropriate and get her thoughts.
Well, session approved the 4 continuing.
And the contributions
Thanks.
to presbytery seems reasonable for
Well,
me team
I think
as a
that's,
first pass.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those, but certainly can look at that. You're talking about the Synod and Mission and some of those?
Yeah, there's specific ways, we could designate how that is apportioned between those. Historically, we've followed what Presbytery recommended, just because they probably have a better look into the needs of each. So that's a brief overview. The sanctuary piece really will be very similar to what we see here, and it'll feed back into the sanctuary spreadsheet, which will tell us to meet that requirement, what an annual amount would be for 2018. And then the budget, the pledge campaign for the sanctuary side would be 3 times that amount. That would give us a rough indication of what the sanctuary 3-year pledge target should be. And that I can give you tomorrow if you.
And we need to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
And this statement, which is a income statement, the chunk that is called debt reduction, which is not part of the budget process, that's an interlock, as I understand it, between the sanctuary fund and the general fund.
Right.
So the sanctuary fund is the place where all monies are loaned and all monies are associated and kept. But then the general fund is where it's paid out of. So there's a piece that's put into the budget for 2018 from the sanctuary fund.
So our mortgage payments to Kansas State's $162,462. If 50,000 of that is included in the general fund, that leaves 112,332 to be raised from to maintain the same balance in our sanctuary fund. So 3 times 112,300 would be 336,000, 337,000, 340 for credit.
So that's the overview. We're going to start into Q&A, so I think we can turn off the video at this point unless there's anything else, Gordon, that you want to...
Nope.
Okay. So this will be, these 2 videos we recorded for posterity to be used for 2018 or beyond. So